Good evening. This is Peter McFarland, and I'm
This
calling.
conference will now be recorded.
Sorry.
Good evening. This is Peter McFarland, and I'm calling the Community Preservation Committee for Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, at 5:30 p.m. for a remote meeting and a public hearing to discuss the 4 projects that we are considering to advance to and recommend to town meeting when we have a special. So now being said, the first order of business we have to take care of is approval of minutes from the September 9th meeting. Oh, sorry. First thing we need to do is do a roll call. Sorry. As far as I'll do a roll call of members, or Pat, do you want to do the disclaimer first, or should I do the roll call?
Yeah, no, I can. I'll do the disclaimer.
And then we'll do the roll call.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that.
So much for entertainment.
No charge.
So for remote meetings, all votes have to be done as a roll call. Format changes when speaking, just state your name clearly. Please refrain from talking over each other. In terms of public participation, any emails can be sent, or any questions that I should say should be sent in advance to cpa@norwoodma.gov. The access link and call-in code and number are found on the agenda, as well as in the meeting calendar on the town website. So that's all I got.
Okay, for that, we'll do a roll call of members, and after that, I'd like anybody that's on the video too to just to identify themselves, especially if you're a presenter for one of the projects that are being proposed. So call for members. Tony Esco.
Hi, thank you. And good evening to everyone at home as well. My name is Tony Esco. I'm a member of the Norwood Historical Commission. I am also its representative on the Community Preservation Committee, and I will be one of the presenters on the George Henry Morse House presentation.
Okay. John Hall.
I'm John Hall, an original member of the committee and still an at-large member.
Matt Lane.
Hi, I'm Matt Lane. I'm a representative from the Board of Selectmen.
Joe Sheehan.
Hi, I'm Joe Sheehan. I'm a member of the Planning Board.
Patty Griffin-Scott.
Patty Starr, member of the Norwood Housing Authority.
And myself, Peter McFarland, Chair. And John Grove.
Hi, I'm John Grove. I'm here to present tonight for a potential project from the Old Parish Preservation Volunteers.
Thank you. Judith Howard.
I'm Judith Howard, Chairman of the Norwood Historical Commission, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Morse House.
Travis Farley. Oh, there he is.
Yep. Hello, everyone. I'm Travis Farley. I'm the Recreation Director. I am here to present on the pool feasibility study and the Murphy Playground basketball resurfacing.
Howie Weinstein, are you?
Howie's here to back me up.
Okay. All right.
He's the brains behind the operation.
Okay. All righty. And I think I've got everybody. Next, first order of business is approval of the minutes from the September 9th meeting. Anybody have any, take a motion to approve?
I'll move to adjourn.
Don, motions two, and Joe Sheehan, seconds.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call to approve. Tony Esco,
Aye.
John Hall,
Aye.
Matt Lane,
Aye.
Joe Sheehan,
Aye.
Patty Starr.
Aye.
Chair votes yes, so unanimously approved. Just one thing before we jump into the projects. I'd just like to, we were talking about this before we started the meeting. I'd just like to recognize somebody that that's a person that just passed this week, Jack Roach. You know, he was a contractor and but also personally, I've known him for 15 years, but he was also a helped if you had any with the disability in the disability community, housing issues. Norwood was always a you said you're from Norwood and at a disability conference or something like that, and they'd say you're so lucky to be from Norwood because housing for disabled people is very, scarce housing. And Jack Roach had a lot to do with how we had units in Norwood, and that's why they said we're so lucky. You know, he provided housing units for 35 disabled adults in Norwood. And I'd just like to recognize him. It was a person to be around, and he contributed a lot and developed a lot of things. And he'll be missed in his passing. I just wanted to recognize him. I know Patty Starr knows him too, and Pat DeShane knows him too because of planning board. I don't know if anybody else does, but he's a fine gentleman, and and Joe Sheehan too from planning board. So, John, would you like to say something?
I'd like to offer a motion that the Community Preservation Committee expresses its appreciation for John Roach for his lifelong work in support of the values that we represent on this coalition committee.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Matt seconds it. Anybody else would like to contribute anything before we take a vote on that? Okay,
I just want to say I knew Jack very well, many years. He was a great guy.
Yeah. All right. On the motion from John, take a quick roll call. Tony,
Aye.
John Hall,
Aye.
Matt Lane,
Aye.
Joe Sheehan,
Aye.
Patty Starr. I take that as an aye. And the chair votes aye. And very gratefully, thank you, John, for that motion. And we'll move on from there. Thank you. For the first project of the night, presenter is Travis Farley, and it's for the Murphy Field basketball court resurfacing. Project is requesting $17,025 for funding. So Travis, you can give us a quick overview of the project, and then we'll take any questions after that.
Yep, I'd be happy to. Pat, are you going to pull up the PowerPoint, or am I just going to give a brief description? How do you want to?
Well, I made you the presenter. I don't know if you want to run through the PowerPoint on your own, or I can pull it up if it's easier.
No, it's okay. I can give it. It's a pretty straightforward project. So those of you familiar, Murphy Field is the park that's at the corner of Pleasant and Lenox. It's a small complex. It's got a little league field, a playground, a basketball court, and a few picnic tables. What I'm proposing to do right now, and we're starting to see some cracking in the courts of the basketball court. So what I'm hoping to do is what I'm proposing to do is resurface the basketball court and have it lined. Thank you, Pat. I am actually as well proposing to install a couple of benches along the basketball court. And I would also like to add a ADA-friendly trail or path from the parking spots down to the basketball court, and then hopefully add 2 handicap spots. So the creation of this path, like I said, would hopefully make these courts and playgrounds far more accessible. Right now, there's no handicap parking down there. This would make the court and the basketball court and the playground more accessible for anyone that has any ADA needs. So it's a pretty straightforward project. It's one that I think would really improve the area. The park definitely gets a ton of use during the summertime, and even the fall and the winter. So I think it would be a nice addition. Right now, you saw the pictures. It's just a concrete right now, so it doesn't look very good. And we're starting to see some cracking in the court as well. So this would help enhance the area, and I think it would make it far more accessible for the community and the neighborhood down there. Thank you, Pat. And that gives you the map. So the yellow spots you see on the top would be the parking spots. The green, and again, this is just a schematic, so you can kind of see the layout, would be the path down. The blue would be the resurfacing of the basketball courts, and the red you see would be the benches.
Okay. Any questions?
I do.
Patty?
Travis, does this include fencing around the area also?
It does not. So the only fencing that is down there right now is around the Little League field. It just wanted to keep it open. If the committee would like me to include it, it really wouldn't be hard for me to get a quote for fencing around the playground, but I don't think you necessarily really need it.
Okay, I guess I'm just thinking it's such a steep hill. Would it be helpful to have one? I'm not sure.
It's a good point. I'd be happy to look into it.
I defer to whatever my committee members mean, but it just kind of popped in my head.
Yeah.
It's a good point. I can go down and take a look, but I don't necessarily think you might need one. It's a great point though. It is a steep hill. And that area you see is just a placeholder. We'll obviously make the path as ADA friendly and slope it as best we can. And we'll make it as accessible as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Travis, does the playground have a fencing at all?
No, we're actually in the process of working with Andy David. He has a friend that unfortunately passed away a number of years ago, and they actually named a couple of the parks after. He has very generously donated. He's been planting a few trees to make the playground a little more shaded. And he's actually going to be replacing the rubber bumpers that we have that line the perimeter of the playground and reinstalling those for us. So very generous donation. Right now, rubber bumpers that run around the perimeter of the playground where you see the wood chips, and they're probably only like a foot tall. And Mr. David from Andy David Landscaping is very generously going to be planting those trees for us and redoing the perimeter of the playground for us.
Very nice.
Yeah, the only thing is the question about is maybe something to divide the playground and the basketball court, so there isn't any, wild.
Yeah, there is the basketball court. It does end before the playground. I want to say it's probably 4 or 5 feet between them both. And when we line the court, we'll give it plenty of a buffer between the playground and the basketball court as well.
Yeah, that's just for safety in case for young kids that kind of
makes perfect sense.
Basketball.
Yes, I totally know how that goes. And then we'll probably put we're going to put a gap between the bumpers. So obviously if anybody came in with a wheelchair, they'd be able to get in and out, and that will be on the basketball court side as well.
Okay. All righty. Anybody else?
And that gives you the breakdown of what the cost would be. I don't foresee any real issues. It's such a straightforward project. The DPW will probably help us out even more. They are awesome. Mark does a great job, and they help us out a considerable amount. So they'll probably help us out with the bench install and the trail. So they're the reason that those prices are so low. They are a huge asset for us, and they help us out with projects like this they can do.
Okay. Seeing no more questions, Travis, why don't you lead us into the pool assessment?
Awesome. So I'm wearing a couple different hats for this. I'm obviously wearing the rec director hat, but I'm also representing we do have a pool feasibility committee that is made up of a member of the selectmen, a member of capital, a member of FinCom, Bob Donnelly, Tom Maloney, Howard Weinstein on the rec staff, Catherine Lee, who's our aquatics director. I apologize if I'm forgetting anybody, but Jerry Miller, Mr. Miller, our prior rec director, is on the committee as well. So I'm kind of wearing two hats with this, but this is just a pool feasibility study. We're hoping to do this study with an architect firm to give us a little more teeth and a few more solidified options for what we can do. I'll give you a little backgrounds about the pool. The pool's currently, Father Max was built in the 1960s. It is the smaller of the two pools. The pump room and the mechanical room, which do a lot of the heavy lifting to make sure the pool stays clean during the summers, below the deck. It services residents as well as summer camps, and actually serves the extended day summer program as well. So obviously you get a ton of foot traffic at that pool during the summer months. And we haven't had any major updates to that pool since the 60s. The bathhouse is not ADA compliant. So we're looking to kind of explore options for what we can do to update that pool as well. And the next one is Haas Pool. This was actually the older of the two, built in 1949. It is the bigger of the two. It's actually right on the bus line. So this probably sees a little more foot traffic than the other one because Father Max is located in the neighborhood. It can be a little more difficult to get to. The pump room, mechanical room on the decks. It services camps during the summer and residents during the summer as well. We have done some work to that pool itself. We've done some return line upgrades. We added a spray park in 2004. And obviously everybody knows about the great bathhouse we just added a few years ago in 2017. So we have done some upgrades to that pool as well over the last 10, 15 years. And about the feasibility study. So the feasibility study would probably take roughly 3 to 4 months, depending on when we're going to do it. The architect firm would come in, they would do a complete assessment of the two pools, our infrastructure, what it looks like, a review of the pool configuration, its usage. So they come in the summer months and see which pools are being used. And based off of our infrastructure, our use, they would give us some proposals as far as what we can do. So that'll give us some real teeth. With those proposals, they'll give us some estimates as far as what that'll cost. So that'll really be able to give us some numbers as far as what we can do and what we can plan for future pool use. So it's a pretty big decision. Obviously, we're definitely unique. Most towns don't have 2 seasonal pools. So Norwood's very lucky in that regards. And I wanted to put some similar CPC projects that other towns have used in this manner as well. This is probably just the third of them. I just grabbed them off the CPC site today. But other towns have done similar pool feasibility studies and designs and actually pool work through the CPC in their towns as well. So this is not, I would say it's common practice with the CPC to try to do this with pools. So I just wanted to show everybody that it has been done in other communities as well. And that's kind of the number of what we're looking at as well.
I think we have a typo there.
Yeah, we might as well. What did I misspell?
I think
You know what,
18
I think it's supposed to be 80.
Oh, yep. $18,000. Best.
What a deal.
such a discounted price.
I apologize. That's supposed to be 80. I apologize for that. I can update it. So it really, I know it's a high price to pay, but when you're talking about a major investment for the future of the pool, this will really give you a great idea as far as what our options are and how much those options will cost. I want to keep the pool. I want to keep, I want to keep the pool at the very least. We need to keep a water option down there. We get a ton of use during the camps. Kids love it during camps, and even the residents down there use it. So I think this study will definitely give us some real teeth to what our options are, and give us a clearer vision as a committee as far as what we need to do. Patty.
Travis, do you know off the top of your head, in order to make it ADA accessible, do we have to get any kind of a lift system, or do we not have to do that?
Ramp.
You're talking about just to get into the pool?
Yes.
So just to get into the pool area, just to get into the pool, you can do a lift. It's a secondary acceptable option, and I could be wrong, but please correct me. But we have a lift that you attach to the side of the pool and you get in and out. The dream scenario for an ADA friendly pool would be zero entry, which is basically just I'm sure you guys are familiar with it, but it's a slope to get into the pool. That would be a dream scenario to have a pool like that, where you don't have to worry about the lifts. It's just easy to get in and out. And that way, everybody and anybody, the pool is then very, very accessible to get in and out of. The lifts they can break down. They're not cheap. I think we got a quote probably 3 or 4 years ago for Haas, and I could be wrong, but I think that lift alone was like 10 or 15 grand just for the lift. But that would be a secondary option, but that would be a dream scenario to have a pool that's zero entry, and maybe that's something they recommend. We'll see.
Okay, thank you very much, Travis.
No problem.
John Hall.
Travis, I've got a few questions. One of them was inspired by the list of other projects you put up there. Are you going to look at what it might take to have a top weighting capability?
Can you say that one more time, John? What was the last part?
Top weighting.
The spray park. So there'll be I can't predict what the architect company will propose. Like I said, they're going to look at our facility. They're going to look at the use. I would imagine that one of the options will be to revamp the pool itself. Maybe another, I'm talking about FM now. Haas, we obviously made the investment a few years ago to put in a new bathhouse. I can't imagine we're going to do a ton there. And then maybe another option would be upgrading the pool area and then adding a spray park area. And then maybe another option would be to convert the pool to a spray park area. I can't predict what they're going to give us as far as options go. I think the dream for me would be maybe keeping the pool and then adding a spray park area similar to Haas, where you go down there, you have a pool, and then you get a spray park, which is a toddler waiting area. I think that would be kind of a dream scenario for FM. And obviously that's going to have a high sticker value.
You've answered part of what I intended by my question. What I'm hoping is that when the results are reported out, you will focus not only on construction tasks, but also divide residents of Norwood into groups and say, this group, like small children, will be served to this extent by this option, to this extent by that option, and so forth. And this also relates to my second question, which is the people who want to use Hawes Pool to swim laps. It looks like it's got painted lanes that would permit that to be done, but it also looks like the primary users are kids who are in there to splash around. And you really can't have in the same space those two uses going on. There are ways of having the laps without changing much of the infrastructure. You can have certain set aside times or days. You can have divided up lanes with little floating things. I'm just wondering if your assessment is going to get into options of that sort.
Yeah, I would imagine, without speaking for them, I would imagine it would. We're going to, well, first of all, to answer your first question, I would imagine we'd have at least a couple of community forum pieces where residents could give their feedback and what they want to see down there. I think that'll definitely be an element to it, because we want to get the community's feedback. But the second element is, I would love to have a tot waiting area. Actually, some outdoor pools that you go to have a area off the pool. It's almost like you have lane lines and there's a tot waiting area off to the side. That would be, it's almost like a zero entry / waiting area. That would be, again, a dream scenario. And I'm sure they'll propose it. Hopefully they'll propose it because, and then we can assess the dollar value, the use, the feasibility, and then we'll leave it up to the community to decide.
And
That makes sense.
my last question is about the implications of any particular option for ongoing operating and maintenance costs. Like, I imagine some of them will actually reduce the costs because it's taking a lot of maintenance to be able to allow these less than ideal designs and statuses to be used safely. But either way, I think more than just the installation costs, we'll be interested to know what the long-term costs are, because as you know, approval of any project includes approval by the people who are going to be responsible for spending the money year after year to do maintenance.
Yeah, you're right. You're 100% correct. We'd have to look at the maintenance cost as well. Some spray parks, newer spray parks actually have recycled water, so they're a lot more cost efficient. They don't use a lot of water. They recycle the water through. So there's definitely elements of the project that can go to reduce your cost and maintenance. The lifeguard costs really wouldn't change for us because we'd still have guards there. And then you're talking about maintenance, what your maintenance would look like, how much that would change. And actually, if you do update the pump room and the mechanical room like we'd hope they would or suggest, you might actually see a reduced maintenance cost because some of the mechanic and pump room is actually from 1960 when they put the pump room in. And obviously things now are a lot more energy efficient. I would imagine that any kind of work we would do to put in there would be a lot more energy efficient for the community and actually hopefully save some maintenance cost.
Thanks, Travis.
No problem.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So just to summarize, the request is for 80,000.
Yeah. Not 18. That would be a very quick assessment study.
We don't want any confusion there as far as that goes. So that being said, I think we're all set, Travis, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone's time. I appreciate it.
All righty. Talk soon.
Have a good night.
Thanks.
That goes.
Thanks, Trev.
Next up is the Old Parish Cemetery Master Plan, and presented by John Grove. And the request is for, has been amended to originally 25,000. Now it has been advised to revise it to $28,000. So with that said, John, it's your mic.
I believe the correct revision is to 26.5.
No.
But I can check that with Patty. I thought it was 26,500.
I think there was something added for contingency.
That was without the contingency. So she didn't
Yeah.
include a contingency with her quote. That's why I rose it to 28.
Oh, so it is 28 then with the contingency.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. All projects.
So, just besides that, is there any, Pat, do you have anything to?
Well, I was gonna, John, I made you the presenter. I don't know if you want to present the PowerPoint yourself or do you want
Well,
me to present it?
it's up to you. I'd rather you do it, and I'll just tell you when.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right, one moment. Yep.
So the PowerPoint you're about to look at is 8 slides just telling you what our intentions are from the beginning. For those of you that need a little background on the Old Parish Preservation Volunteers, we are a 501c3 nonprofit. We started up in April of 2017, or no, summer of 2017, had our first summer of work events in the summer of 2018. Right now, we've got about 100 people on our email list on any given work day. We can be pre-COVID work days, let's put it that way. We'll have between 10 and 20 of our volunteers show up on a Saturday morning and clean graves, reset stones, etc. And this is all with the purpose of protecting, preserving, enhancing, and restoring this, probably the oldest piece of Norwood-owned land in the town at this point. It dates back to 1740. It was crying out for a group to come forward and kind of foster care this neglected cemetery. It's got landscaping that's being done by the cemetery department. However, it's not an active cemetery, so there's no burials going on. The graves date back, as I said, from 1740, and we think the most recent that we can come across now is around 1947, 48. As I said, the purpose is to enhance, restore, and offer this as a location in Norwood where people can see historic preservation at work. It's an outdoor museum. It's a slice of green space in Norwood Center. If you want to go to the second slide, Patrick. We have engaged, or we will engage with the funding of this project, Halverson Design Partnership. It's a Boston-based landscape architectural firm. They were referred, we were referred to them by Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge, which is a world-renowned garden park type cemetery. They've done extensive work there, and in our own backyard, they've also done work for the Old Village Cemetery in Dedham, doing a very similar project for Dedham that we're having them do for us. Next slide, please. So what we want them to do is a master plan. As I said, we are all volunteers, the 100 of us who are interested in preserving the cemetery. None of us are cemetery experts, nor landscape architects for that matter. When you look at the cemetery, it cries out for some kind of urgent care. On the back side, on the east side, this is the land that abuts the MBTA parking lot at Norwood Depot. There have been probably 100 years of erosion going on there. When the cemetery was first, the land was granted to South Dedham, it was called Sandy Hill. We now know, after working up there for a couple of years, why. It's very loose, easily eroding soil on the backside. It's well documented in the 19th century. There were at least 2 storms that came through town, probably not unlike the one we had in June, where buckets of water deteriorated the backside, and it resulted in some of our stones sliding off down the hill toward what was then the tannery. A wall was erected in the 1880s to retain some of that soil, but that's an urgent need that we need this landscape architect to tell us, make recommendations on how best to shore up that east side. We know that there's stones to be found there. If you'll go ahead a slide, Patrick, I can show you where you can see the second slide from the right shows the back side of the property. You can see those stones have fallen, and the good news is, since this picture was taken, we've been able to reset those stones upright. The erosion continues, however. You can see the farthest right side is looking up the side of the hill where the erosion is very bad. So that's one of the things we want them to do. We want them to also help us make recommendations about use of the cemetery by the public. We picture it being a contemplative space that will be open and offered to the public much more often than it had been in recent memory. Just since we've begun working in the cemetery for the last couple of years, we've been able to open it on Veterans Day, Memorial Day, July 4th. July 4th of 2019, we held an event there, unlike anything that else that happened in the cemetery, probably since we had it in 1741. We did a recreation of Frederick Douglass's July 4th speech, had about 100 people in attendance. So we envisioned the place to be something that Norwood can recognize as a historic outdoor museum. It's green space in the heart of Norwood Center. If you look at some of the pictures on the slides, you can see we are in sight of the town hall. At one point, the Cemetery Street, before there was a town common, Cemetery Street ran through what is today the common, diagonally over to Railroad Avenue. And it was called Cemetery Street because it was the route from the Congregational Church to their burial ground, which is the Old Parish Cemetery. So we're looking for that $28,000 in funding to get a master plan. When the master plan is completed, we want to confer with the town, the DPW, Paul Rinaldi, who's been behind us all the way, and Mark, Ryan. Let them know what the experts are saying can be done to preserve that cemetery, make it a secure place, make it a park-like setting, and more attractive and more useful than what it's getting today. Any questions?
John Hall?
John, nice presentation, and I've been very impressed by the work of the group over the last several years. I have a couple questions which are intended to encourage you to think broadly. One of them is, rather than simply coming up with strategies to shore up the side that has suffered serious erosion, if they could take a look at what it would take to protect the site from erosion and damage, weather related, wherever it might crop up. That I think would be useful. The other is, you mentioned that you hope the changes will make it easier to sustain more frequent use. And so I think it would be good if the plan addressed how you protect it and how you maintain it under conditions of significantly heavier use.
Yeah, very good points. It's one of these cases where we don't know what we don't know, and they may point out other points in the cemetery that are equally vulnerable, like you're saying, and their expertise is what we're going to rely on. If we tell them, hey, we want to be open, more often, and we can see more foot traffic, how do you recommend we steer the foot traffic through the cemetery without any damage to the cemetery? That's exactly why we want to engage them on this.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Anyone else? Joe Greeley?
No.
Thank you for joining us.
Yes, this is the third time I've joined you. Thanks for having me. John, thanks for your presentation. Very interesting. I'm excited to see where the cemetery renovation continues. The question I had is relative to not so much the study, but I think the future direction of some of the abutters may impact the study and certainly the cemetery. I just wanted to kind of get a quick impression from you on where you think the MBTA might be going with the railroad yard, the lot.
Yeah, the answer is I don't have an answer, but the abutters are important. The MBTA being one of them, and there's a private homeowner that abuts. There's several abutters that, because we don't have any specifics about what we're going to be doing within the property, there's really not anything we can discuss with them at this point. Certainly, if Halverson recommends something and the town agrees this is something we ought to be doing, we're going to be coming back, looking for funding for some of these little projects that the experts tell us we need to do to shore up the place. And of course, that's going to be like any other event that happens in town. The abutters are going to get, advised of it. But right now, we don't have much to talk to them about, particularly the MBTA. I mean, I've heard rumors that MBTA parking lot configuration is going to change. It's strictly rumor as far as I know, but we certainly know that our property abuts theirs. And there's even we call it the no man's land because it's chain link fenced off, and then there's a wall, which is right now probably holding up that side of that east side hill. So it's very important that the MBTA be involved with what has to be done to protect the town property there. Which we've advised Halverson that that's important to us too, that we've got abutters that we want to respect their concerns.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anyone else? Tony?
Yes, thank you. I just want to add my support to this project, very slightly similar to the Morse House that I'll talk about next. the Old Parish Cemetery really represents part of Norwood's sort of prenatal history. There are people interred there from before Norwood's incorporation, and it's really part of our early history, and it's something I think Norwood should highlight a little more than we have in the past as we come up to our 150th. So I think it's a really worthwhile and sacred project.
Agree.
Thank you, Tony. Not seeing anything else. I think we can, thank you, John, for your presentation. And continued success with the committee as far as getting, keeping the volunteers and keeping that project
I
alive.
have a question though, of the committee, I have a question. So we're presenting, this is a public hearing tonight. What are our next steps?
Well, as far as what's going to happen, then the committee's going to make it. Well, what happens with this, these 4 projects, we'll be meeting to vote to recommend it to town meeting. And we just need to find out when the special town, which we're planning that there'll be a special town meeting probably in November. And we'll put these as on the warrant. These 4, if all 4 projects go ahead, all 4 projects will be on the warrant for November, and we'd recommend the town meeting, and then they take a vote, and then the money is allotted for these projects, and then you can start going ahead with your,
Perfect.
Contacting.
So the next thing is for you guys to either vote your support or not support, and then it goes to town meeting, and then presuming town meeting supports it, that's it, right?
You get your funding to do your master plan. Okay. Hopefully we're within 2 months of it.
Mr. Chairman, I think you may have jumped over an important step before we vote to recommend, and that is that each of the presenters will have the opportunity to modify and strengthen their proposal based on the comments that you heard tonight and any other thinking that goes on before submitting a final proposal, which is what we'll vote on. Am I correct in doing that?
As far as I know, you are correct. If they have anything in the last minute, like the only thing we talked about, maybe Travis was going to update his for fencing, but as far as, I don't know if John had and the Old Parish Cemetery volunteers have anything they want to. Their projects basically their requests have stayed the same since they made it originally. The only thing that changed was the timing from the time they got the original request. It needed to be updated for money because it'd been over a year. Besides that, I don't think they've made any modifications to the request at all, and I think it's pretty well in the hands of us to DNA it and move it on.
I would suggest that, John, even for a proposal like yours, where what you're planning to do and what you expect it to cost may be not modified or modified very little, you may hear some things that lead you to want to clarify or strengthen the wording so that the piece is even more compelling than it was in the original proposal. That'll be your call. But you have time, a limited amount of time to do that.
Okay, understood.
If there's anything, please contact Patrick and he'll.
Will do.
Okay. Tony?
Thank you. In relation to John Hall's comments, this was a concern I had too in regards to presentations at town meeting. Will the atmosphere of town meeting again be such that brevity will be the, Pat, want to answer that?
I don't, we can't really discuss that right now. We got to wait until we figure out what's going to happen with town meeting. I understand, seeing what happened last town meeting, I would be a concern, yes. But right now, we don't know what the ground rules are and talk about it right now.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of off purpose here right now, and we can discuss that for sure.
Sure.
As far as that goes. So I like to just take a pass on that one right now. We'll talk about October. Besides that, the John Grove, thank you very much.
you.
And
Thank you.
talk to Patrick if you have any concerns or questions after this, okay?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
thanks, John.
Okay, and now we're on to the Morse House Feasibility Study and Master Plan. Judith Howard and Tony Esco, and the request is for $50,000. So Tony or Judith, who's ever going to lead us off, please start.
I think Judith
Hi,
is
this
first.
is Judith.
Good
Right.
evening.
This is like a two-pronged presentation, so I'll go first and then Tony will pick up after. 20 years ago, a large group of interested individuals, spearheaded by Dale Day, who was a resident of South Norwood at the time, saw the need to resurrect the town-owned Moss House from its very sad condition. But local businesses and individuals came forward to volunteer and assist. Like Bird and Son donated certain teak shingles, and they also donated the labor to replace the roof. And then Babel's donated the historically designed wallpaper similar to the original. And its installation was done by resident Richard Anderson. Frank Civatone Construction cleared the hill in the back for an archaeological dig, and Aaron Guile, chapter of the DAR, donated the American flag. Other Norwood residents donated the old freezer, the mantle and the fireplace around, the carved table in the dining room, and the buffet in the breakfast room. And one Norwood resident purchased and had framed, especially for the Moss House, an historic map of the town of Norwood, which is prominently displayed over the buffet. So over the years, individuals took their time and put their blood, sweat, and tears to strip, sand, prime, and paint stairs to the second floor, cleaned, oiled, and polished the original dark molding in the different rooms, and made sure the beautiful large windows were cleaned and framed with appropriate curtains and drapes. Well, when residents and organizations saw what was going on, they decided they wanted to be a part of something big and have their meetings and celebrations there. So let me tell you who came. The Norwood Evening Garden Club held their art and bloom exhibits at the Moss House each April for years. Members of the Garden Club would interpret the artworks of Norwood High and now Walpole High students with floral arrangements, and residents from all over the area came to see the beautiful and a very popular exhibit. So the Norwood Republican Town Committee, the Norwood Democratic Town Committee, both have used the Moss House for their meetings and get-togethers. And so have Progressive Norwood, Together Yes. The Lions Club had its luncheon there in June 2019. The Rotary Club has upped its number of meetings, as did the Toastmasters Club. So the Moss House was included on the tour for South Norwood Walks. And to show its appreciation to all Norwood veterans, the Moss House held a very lovely exhibit attended by veterans, their families, town officials, and interested Norwood residents. So weddings and receptions and birthday parties, Christmas parties, and other celebrations by Norwood residents indicate the Moss House is looked upon very much in favor. And actually, one can call it the People's House, town-owned and town-used. So we're just asking for your support, and now I can turn it over to Tony, and she'll make her presentation now. Thanks.
Thank you, Judith. So just to go back a bit, this presentation requests a $50,000 community preservation funds request for a feasibility study and master plan for the George Henry Morse House situated on 1285 Washington Street. Just to show the folks at home some of the rooms within this home, you're looking at the front parlor and the beautiful warm woodwork of the stairway in the front hall. Here we see that the breakfast room reveals the backside of a brick beehive oven right here. That's the backside of it. And would actually like to have this professionally assessed to see if this predates the new part of the house, which I'll explain later. You can see that there are hardwood floors throughout and trim work, which add to the warmth of the first floor of the house. The pictures in the dining room are of George H. Morse and his family, and they're prominently displayed on the wall. On this side are his daughters, and then he was married twice, his first and his second wife, which we will describe. First of all, George Henry Morse, the 9th generation descendant of Samuel Morse, who was born circa 1585 in England and buried at Vine Lake Cemetery in Medfield, Mass. George H. Morse's family emigrated from England to the Mass Bay area in 1635 on the ship entitled The Increase, during the Great Puritan Migration period, which history documents from 1620 to 1640. The well-known ship, the Mayflower, owns the accolade of being the first ship to arrive to our shores in 1620 during this active migration period. European colonization continued. Noah's history is a fascinating one and a part of it. It is a history that needs to be more fully preserved, documented, and shared so that the hard work and leadership of past founders can be appreciated and passed on to the community and future generations here. Ezra Morse, born circa 1643, is the grandson of Samuel Morse, and he moved from Dedham further to South Dedham at the request and with the help of Dedham leaders. There is legitimate documentation in Dedham's historic records that he set up a sawmill and built his home overlooking what is now Endine Farm, site of the present Coakley Middle School. Others followed from Dedham and eventually formed a community which in time would become Norwood. The Morse House sits on the site of the earliest homestead in Norwood and of one of Norwood's most prominent families. Fast forward to the 9th generation of Samuel Morse and the 7th generation of Ezra Morse, we have George Henry Morse. I know this might be hard to read for folks at home, but this is the ancestry of George Henry Morse, starting with Samuel Morse, who was born circa 1585. Then he has a son, John Morse. Then there's Ezra Morse Sr., Ezra Morse Jr., and then there's Joseph. And Joseph had a brother, Ezra. That would be Ezra Morse III, but the lineage of George H. Morse is from Joseph. After Joseph is Silas Morse, then a George, then a Joseph, and then a George, and then a George. And George's two daughters, Ellen Florence, born 1857, died 1923. And he had a daughter, Catherine William, born 1858 and passed away, unfortunately, in 1879, young. Morse descendants continued mill work on Water Street, which is ultimately where the Morse family descendants did their industrial work with the mill, and that was operated until the 1800s near the Neponset River at the East Walpole line. So the Henry Morse House, the site itself goes back to predates Norwood's earliest times, going back to the 1600s. George Henry Morse was born in February 1834 in South Dedham, Norfolk County. He died on May 6, 1917. He's buried in Highland Cemetery, Norwood. He built his home at the Washington Street site a few years before Norwood was founded in 1872. It is an Italianate style home built circa 1868. He married and raised his family there. He was a civic leader, landowner, farmer, and auctioneer, a member and benefactor of Orient Lodge. George Henry Morse married Abby Shackley first, with whom he had 2 daughters. Firstborn, Ellen Florence, as mentioned earlier, from 1857 to 1923. She attended the Bolshevik schools. She was close to her father until he died. Second-born, Kate Lillian, sadly died young at age 21 years from a fatal illness. 8 generations of the Morse family have been on the site of the Morse house on Morse Hill. Following the death of his wife, Abby, he married Alphine H. Atkins. She died in 1896 and is buried in Old Parish Cemetery, Norwood. A little bit about the house. There is a record of town ownership dated July 1974, and it is recorded in 1975. It was acquired and accepted. It was land from Charles S. Bird Jr. It was given to Norwood to be used by the inhabitants of the town of Norwood. We have reason to believe that it could be the site of Ezra Morse's original salt box homestead, and I'll give more information on that in another slide. And also that the salt box house kitchen area with the beehive oven may have some dates to 1678, and we would like to get the assessment to maybe verify this. The Italianate home itself dates to 1876, and 8 generations of the Morse family lived on the site. And the town's records, it has an assessed value, and I have to say this was from last year when we put this together, of $541,700. It's roughly 2/3 of an acre of land area, 26,880 feet. It had a land valuation of $229,600. It is a 2-story building with a basement. It has a total of 11 rooms and 2 bathrooms. There are 4 spacious bedrooms upstairs. I did not include pictures in this presentation just for brevity, but the formal part of the house is on the 1st floor. It's also the site of the Little Brick Schoolhouse is on the property that was rebuilt there. Judith could maybe talk about that more if somebody wants to hear about it. Here are a few more pictures of the house. We included this one here, which is a large boulder that's in the basement, which we think is under the original salt box kitchen area. And again, we want to get that verified. It's not uncommon for large boulders to be in basements in older homes because it was just hard to move them out of the hole. So we do want to have the brick oven looked at. Here's a front view. You can see it looks quite ancient. And there is also a peak window in the ceiling. There's an acrylic piece in the front there so that you can see the old post and beam construction in that area. You can see some of the original beams. One of the most interesting and authentic records that's in our possession is this picture. This was given to Norwood by George Henry Morse's daughter, Ellen Florence Morse, in 1922. George H. Morse's daughter, Ellen Florence Morse, an 8th generation grandchild, provided us with a drawing floor plan of the original Morse salt box house. Ezra Morse, who lived from about 1634 to 1691, she says lived in that house, and that it was lived in by successive generations until it was torn down in 1867 after the new present-day Morse house was erected. And this information is important because Ellen Florence would have been close to 10 years old when her father's house was being built. This is her recollection rendered by an artist of what the salt box house looked like. And she says that it was retained partially until the house was built, and then the major part of the salt box house was turned down, with the exception of part of the kitchen. So we would really like to have the veracity of that authenticated a little more in this assessment, because it would certainly be an interesting piece of information. Although the house, the George Henry Morse house, important stands alone, even if this does not cannot be corroborated. This idyllic photo was taken around 1868. We know that the house dates at least this far back. This is in the possession of, I believe, of the Norwood Historic Society, and the picture's dated 1868. That's why we know the house was at least built then. And although maybe not easy to see, the Morse family is actually, the ladies are in the front here, and it looks like his dog is there. And I do acknowledge that this picture and a quote from the book is from John Grove's book, Images of Norwood. And I did ask him permission to include this. I thank you for it. And so this says that the George H. Morse house was built, the house in the barn, around 1868 atop Morse Hill near South Norwood on the East Walpole line, and that he was a descendant of the area's first settler, Ezra Morse. So this site, the whole site, not just the house, but the whole site goes back to the earliest of times in South Dedham's history, and then, of course, in Norwood's history. This is the document. It's also on the wall in the Morse house, and there's a copy of it here that indicates that the house was given to us for $1. It's a recording document dated July 14th, 1974, and recorded in 1975 at Norfolk County Registry of Deeds, indicating the sale of the Morse property for $1 from the Home Building Company Incorporated of Walpole, which was the Bird family business. A little information about George Henry Morse, who was a prominent Norwood civic leader. On March 6, 1872, the townspeople formally celebrated the birth of Norwood with William B. Washburn present. He was the 22nd governor of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts at the time, and 2 members of the Dedham Board of Selectmen were with him at that date. George Henry Morse was appointed the first assessor in Norwood after it was incorporated in 1872. He was elected to the Board of Selectmen in the first subsequent public held election, and served in that capacity as selectman from 1877 to 1893. He also served as a fire chief in Norwood, and he's listed among the first surveyors of highways in Norwood, which was common sense because he owned a lot of property at the time. He knew the landscape very well. I would like to acknowledge very appreciatively Norwood Memorial's library and their access to many archived and digitized Norwood annual reports. They received many grants, and they're able to do a lot of this great work. This is an actual copy of Norwood's 1872-1873 town offices. And here you can see prominently displayed George H. Morse, indeed the town's first assessor. Here also we can see that he is a member of the selectmen. Samuel Pond is chair, Tyler Thayer selectman, and George H. Morse on the selectmen as a clerk. He is also the engineer for the fire department as chief, listed down here under engineers of fire department. So George Henry Morse was talented in many areas for sure. Again, here we can see in 73, 74, George Henry Morse now is no longer the clerk, but listed under assessors. And over here as survey of highways, just to authenticate that comment. Nearly 20 years ago, after many years of neglect, a wonderful group of volunteers requested and received permission from the Board of Selectmen to begin a restoration process of the Morse house. Their labors of love raised in excess of $100,000 for improvements and repairs that brought the house to a modest point where it could be used and enjoyed by numerous organizations as a meeting place and historic museum. Judith Howard's comments mentioned how many people have used it. However, over time, it became apparent that the town needed to become more actively involved in the care of the house. The Board of Selectmen recently developed a use policy with regulations to help and protect and manage the house. Of course, now it's been closed because of COVID. The Norwood Historical Commission received a letter of support from the Board of Selectmen to move forward with this Community Preservation Fund's request for a professional, comprehensive feasibility study and master plan. We need to fully understand the current conditions of this historic property, both inside and outside, to determine what improvements would be necessary and feasible to bring it into compliance and safe use for the 21st century. Among areas to address are improvements to lighting, security, heating, and air conditioning, window restoration and rehabilitation, building code and accessibility compliance updates, 21st century updates such as internet, and as I said, a professional opinion regarding the dating or age of the beehive oven on the west side kitchen area of the house. The goals of this application request are to obtain a professional assessment of the entire property, use the master plan to determine what restoration choices are deemed feasible, garner community awareness, appreciation, and support of the authentic historic George H. Morse property, and to educate the public on the many civic contributions of the Morse family. I thank you for your time and entertain any questions. The end.
Good job, Tony.
I have a lot more. I have a lot more information, but I've kept this version to a shorter version for generally for town meeting, but there's a lot of other backup information for this house.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions from the committee or anybody? John Paul?
First of all, to Judith and Tony, these two presentations were by far the strongest I've seen on this project since we first started discussing it. Judith, I thought your very detailed recitation of people who felt strongly enough about this house to donate important stuff for its rehabilitation was very persuasive. And your description, also your listing of the people, the groups that have made use of it, was an excellent impact on the public point. Tony, as I've said in a previous meeting, I find it less persuasive to talk about how important Morse was than about how important the house was. But I have to say, you've got a lot of stuff that ratchets up his importance. And I found another one you could add while we were talking. George H. Morse was also one of Norwood's first surveyors of highways. And I
Oh,
can.
yes, I thought I had that in there.
If you
We
did,
included it in.
yeah,
It's just
then,
a surveyor. It just didn't mention surveyor of highways, just surveyor.
yeah,
Oh,
okay.
yeah, it's in there. Yeah.
It's in there.
And as I say, that made so much sense because he knew the landscape inside out. The Morse family owned so much property. He was very savvy.
In the first decade of Norwood, when it was chartered, Morse was all over the government. And several other people were, but he definitely has a case to be made there. So those are the positive things. My suggestions going forward are, it would be good to make sure that the result looks at different options. Think of what was done with the chapel, where you had one option just to keep it from falling down, another to handle limited usage, and a third to handle the full usage of what it had been at its peak. You could imagine something like that for the Morse house, and I think that would be useful to frame the options for the committee and later for the town.
Right.
Another point is that the $50,000 price tag sounds like a round number. I don't know that it's been developed up from components, and if so, it's the only project I've seen on this committee that doesn't have a detailed basis for the specific dollar amount. Maybe Patrick knows better than I on this, wouldn't surprise me. But if you could provide something that says, we're asking for this amount for this reason.
I thought in GNAP, I'll look it up. In GNAP's cursory look at the house, I thought there was a projected amount there. And then in discussions with Kathy Connie, and I had emailed her a couple months ago too. She too felt that the 50,000 was a sufficient target number for that type of a feasibility plan, a master plan for a property this size. Judith, do you have the paperwork in front of you from GNAP? Because I thought.
I'll take
I
this.
think
Just-
the
Can I jump in? Can I jump in on
information
this
was
one?
distributed to the committee.
Can I jump in on this? Patrick and I have been talking about this, and Patrick's gone back to Kathy Connie too, and Kathy Connie felt that number was feasible. So
Thank you.
we're just going by what they requested, and Kathy Connie has weighed in a couple of times as far as thinking that estimate is still valid right now. So, you know.
Clear my concern.
Yeah.
There. I just
I
want
know
to
we
make,
have the paperwork. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was gonna say, I know we have the paperwork from DNAP providing kind of more of a detailed estimate for construction costs and everything like that. But as Pete mentioned, I think what we had discussed last March or February was going forward with more of the feasibility study and master plan as like a first step and phasing the project rather than thinking about anything related to construction costs right now.
Because actually, to get something in more detail, it actually costs us money. It
Yeah.
costs us money just to get the cursory review that GNAP did for us.
Yes.
I think we'll go with the 50,000.
And also, if I may, Kathy Connie forwarded that my second inquiry to GNAP, and she did not receive anything that said it's not enough or.
Okay. And I think that those are my questions, and very, very well done on the presentation.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Pat, you might want to take down the picture so we can.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that.
Look at these thumbnails. I can't see anybody.
There you go.
If anybody's got a hand up, it's like,
Okay, I'm gonna congratulate myself for sharing my screen and making it come back.
good job, Tony.
Yeah.
I don't see any other questions. I think we're done with this portion of the presentations. I guess my next thing would be to listen to other discussion to close the public hearing. I'll take a motion for that.
Motion to close the hearing?
Which
Second,
Really?
Joe Greeley and then Joe Sheehan seconded. Okay. Motion to close the public hearing. Any other discussion? Otherwise, we'll take a vote. Roll call. Tony Esco.
Aye.
Joe Greeley.
Aye.
John Hall.
Aye.
Matt Lane.
Aye.
Joe Sheehan.
aye.
Patty Starr.
Aye.
And chair votes yes to close. So, so move it. The public hearing has been closed. What's the pleasure of the committee? Any other discussion on this, or do we want to adjourn?
Adjourn?
Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
I saw Patty Starr's hand up first. Okay. Seeing that, well, and just to note, our next meeting will be, I should have,
October 12th,
October 14th,
14th.
right? October 14th. So then on that agenda will be voting the, to recommend the four, make recommendations of the 4 projects. So that'll be on the agenda. We'll discuss it then. Patrick thinks there is a tentative date for special.
Yep.
And what is it?
So I was told just kind of an unofficial date to kind of keep on the radar would be November 12th. And again, that's unofficial. That was just kind of a rough idea of when it would be. So that's, I believe, the second week in November. So just something to keep on the radar. Obviously, we have one meeting scheduled for October. We should be good at that point, but if there's a need for any second meeting, if there's an issue in terms of articles, anything like that, we would have time in October for an additional meeting if need be. So that's just something to keep on your radar.
Yeah, and just to note, November 11th is the holiday, so we're not meeting until the 18th of November. So we'll have to discuss that in October, because we don't really have a firm commitment yet for November 12th, but if that's the case, we'll discuss it in October as far as we need any additional meetings in case we have to do something for town meeting. That
Yeah.
we don't know
And that's,
about yet.
yeah, that's an unofficial date. That's just something to keep in the back of our mind when we meet on the 14th. Just to plan around that. So obviously, it'd be good to have our articles kind of in a draft format going into that meeting. And obviously, depending on how you all vote on the projects, we can also kind of get a good idea of how our articles will be set up at that meeting as well.
Okay. Anything else other than that? I'll take a roll call and we can close the meeting. Start with Tony again.
Aye.
Joe Greeley,
Aye.
John Hall,
Aye.
Matt Lane,
Aye.
Joe Sheehan,
Aye.
Eddie Starr,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So with that, good night, everybody.